Hi, and welcome to another episode of We Know Everything Almost. I'm your host, Cook, and we're back again this week, and got another good special guest with me. I met him a couple years ago. In fact, it was at the radio station,
97.3.
No,
Charles Everest.
Charles Everest station.
Mm-hmm.
We were both on the same night. In fact,
That's correct.
I got on 15 minutes, and then Joe got on. But this is Joel Gill. He's running for the Democratic. Well, you've got the nomination.
I have the nomination.
You have the nomination. He is running as the Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress in District 3, going up against the incumbent Greg Harper.
Well, he's the fellow that currently occupies the office.
For the moment, anyway, right?
He's been there for 19 months.
Okay.
It's not, when you say incumbent,
It's like
that sounds like an
it's not
entrenched
like Benny,
fellow.
like 18 years, So he's just kind of getting started on that,
Right.
and I guess you're just trying to make sure that he just got his toes in there, and he's on his way out again, right?
Well, I hope he is, and in fact, Richard, if some of your people hear this, I hope they'd really pay attention, because in Mr. Harper's short 19 months in office, when Governor Barber was begging for help in funding the S-CHIPS bill, Mr. Harper said no. He voted against it.
Okay.
When it came time to vote on equal pay for women, Mr. Harper said no, women don't need to earn as much.
Okay, I
as
didn't
men.
know that one.
Yes, that was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009. But shortly after that, he received a prestigious promotion within the party.
Okay. Gee, I wonder if there was any tie-in there. So we, but I know throughout the state, I'm finding out. You're well known. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound bad.
Right.
I mean, I've heard of you, but you don't hear a whole lot about you. And I actually heard it on a radio station talking about at one time that you'd be a good Secretary of Agriculture for the state.
Well, my background for the last 42 years has been in livestock and marketing across Mississippi. And, Paul Gallo referenced me as being the cattle farmer from Pickens, and calling me a cattle farmer is a little bit like saying Paul Gallo works at the radio station sometimes, maybe cleaning up. It just doesn't reference it. Actually, Richard, I'm an independent businessman who happens to be a livestock dealer. Our company directly employs 8. At our peak, we were employing 15, but the company annually does gross business anywhere from $25 to $50 million.
Wow.
Of course, we don't get to keep
near
any of that, but on the periphery, we also provide jobs for an additional 40 people.
Okay.
So I know what it is to make a payroll each and every week. I know what it is to mess with the 941s, and I know how much of a burden taxes can be on small businesses. That's why I want to be right there in the forefront. I'm not an attorney. I don't try and bend these rules, but I do have a little bit of political finesse.
Okay.
I've served 2 terms as alderman in the town of Pickens, one from 89 to 93, and then again from 2005 to 2009. And in 2009, the people of Pickens, which I don't know if your viewers are aware of it, is approximately 85% African American, they selected this poor white boy to be their mayor.
Oh, well,
and so I've been serving there for past 15 months as mayor.
Okay. Now, what is the term of mayor in Pickens generally? I mean,
4 years.
4 years. So you're prepared to move on to the next stage.
I would be prepared. In fact, that is one thing that your guest a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Marcy, had an advantage over me, because while I technically don't live in the district, I'm only 16.4 miles north of it.
Not 120.
No, and it's a very specious argument, in that, especially in the 3rd, where it's gerrymandered as badly as it is. When you get into the Leake County area, as you drive, Carthage is not in the district.
Yeah, I know that.
But as you drive south, only a short 2 miles from Carthage, you cross the Pearl River. Once you cross the Pearl River, the east side of the road is in the district. The west side is not. And to me, Richard, it's patently ridiculous to say that two neighbors on the same street, on the same highway, just because they live across the road from each other, have absolutely nothing
Right.
to do with each other. In the same way, if I were to run in the Delta District, I don't know a soul
Right.
up there outside of the people in the town of Pickens. And the only way that I came to know those was when my wife and I moved there in 1979. Up until that point, my father had moved us to Jackson, Mississippi in 1963 when I was 12 years old. I went through Bailey Junior High School.
Okay.
I was a graduate of Callaway High School, some product of the public school system, and then Millsaps College. But we had a little 5-year-old boy in '79, and at that time the Jackson crime problem was beginning to get a little more intense, so we just drew an arbitrary line in between Yazoo City and Kosciuszko, Mississippi, and Pickens wound up being the choice location.
Okay.
We were able to sell our home in Jackson and secure enough funds to actually buy outright a property in Pickens and have the money to refurbish it and get my wife a different car, which made her very happy.
Oh, I imagine. There's something about getting that wife a car always seems to be a plus whenever you're moving around.
Absolutely. And one thing about it, if your wife isn't happy, nobody's
Nobody's
happy.
happy. Yeah. I had a question. I just went blank on the question.
Oh.
But so you're like I said, 16 miles in there because I remember them talking about
Right.
that at one time because now.
But getting back to that, the reason I run in the third is, as I told you, I've been in the cattle business
Yeah.
for a long time. In fact, the last 42 years. If you can remember back when Jim Buck Ross was saying 1 million more by '74, at that time in the state of Mississippi, we had 3.2 million head of cattle.
Wow.
It would have been very easy to have had 1 million extra by '74. You had 72 livestock auctions, and you had 8 livestock dealers. Now our herd in Mississippi has contracted to a little over 1 million head. The sale barns have shrunk to a mere 20, and there are 15 livestock dealers competing
For that little bit.
for that little bit. So my normal run. Well, in fact, today I was in Meridian. I actually worked the sale at Meridian. I stopped back through Forest. Of course, the other sales that I had worked in the past on Monday would have been Macon, Mississippi, of course, which is in the district. Hattiesburg, which is technically out of the district, but not more than another 15 or 18 miles, and a lot of their customers come from there.
Okay.
Now, tomorrow, the sales that I had made in the past were Tylertown and also Brookhaven. I still do occasionally make Brookhaven down in Lincoln County, which is in the district, or I will go to Mize, which is in the district, or I'll go to Philadelphia. I worked Philadelphia for almost 14 years straight. So you mentioned that I was pretty well known through the area.
I would say, yeah.
It's because of my business contacts and actually helping these people by providing them an economic opportunity, giving them some place to sell their cattle.
Okay.
And I'm actually a little different than a lot of dealers because I don't like to go to an individual's farm or ranch and buy their cattle. I'll give every penny that I can for them if they will bring them to the auction. But I believe very, very much in the free competitive market system. And if I were to go to that individual's farm or ranch, I could give them all that I would on the cattle that I have an order for. But now they're wanting to sell everything. And so the ones that I don't have an order for, I'm going to have to back those up and not really give them fair market value. Now they're going to assume that they're getting that. But here in Mississippi, where we sell every animal one at a time, it allows all of the competition around that ring to come into play. Even though we only get about 15 to 20 seconds to focus on that animal, as business professionals, we are able to do that. We have to guess the weight of the animal, determine, of course, its sex and its quality, and what we're going to give for it. And once that we arrive at that figure, Sometimes maybe the guy next to us has just made us a little irritated, and we'll give a couple dollars more than we'd planned to. But that's all part of it.
Okay.
So that's why I support the market system.
Well, now let me ask you. You were talking a while ago that at one time we had like 3.5 million, and we're down to. Is there a reason that it's gone down, or is it just? I mean, it's just the economy, or is it?
No, it's actually natural attrition. See, Rankin County used to be a very, very large cattle area. Now it's a very, very large population area.
So okay.
You've seen some contraction in the Hinds County area. You've seen a lot in the Delta where the crops have shifted from cattle and cotton and beans over to catfish. You know, and it's just a.
And catfish seems to be catching on here. Yeah.
Well, catfish is very good. In fact, I'm glad that they're there because they were really the impetus. I know your viewers can probably see this little pin that I wear. It has MCOOL on it, and that stands for Mandatory Country of Origin Labeling.
Oh, yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard about that. I like that idea. Yeah,
Yes,
that's good.
you know, it lets you know where the food you purchase comes from, and that was part of the 2002 Farm Bill. But it took until 2005 to get implemented on seafood, and until 2008 to get implemented on red meat and poultry. Richard, it has to do with corporate influences. Because if your meat is inspected by a state inspector, it's healthy. It's healthy enough to be sold anywhere in the state of Mississippi, but it's not healthy enough to be shipped across the border to Louisiana or Arkansas or Alabama. However, this exact same plant can kill and ship anywhere in America pheasant, elk, quail. It's because those particular products are such a minor part of the meat chain that the big guys don't care about it. So that plant that is not clean enough to ship Mississippi chickens to Louisiana is clean enough to ship Mississippi quail.
Yeah.
These are some of the issues we're fighting. In fact, on the 27th of this month, I'll be in Fort Collins, Colorado, standing up for producers of Mississippi at the RCAF USA pavilion, where the Attorney General of the United States and also the Secretary of Agriculture of the United States. RCAF is the cattle group that I work with, but we're also working with Food and Water Watch, the Consumer Union, the Farmers Union. It should be a very, very large group of people that are turning out to protest more or less the corporate takeover of the food chain, and especially some things like genetically modified crops. Did you realize that if you plant your soybeans, and they're not the Monsanto brand, but they're a different brand that you want to use, where you may want to keep your seed, and your neighbor across the road plants genetically modified beans, and that pollen, if it cross-pollinates and gets into your plants, you actually owe Monsanto a fee.
Oh my God.
And if you were growing organic crops, your crops no longer qualify for organic because it has the modified gene, but you still owe Monsanto because you're infringing on their patent.
No, that's government for you. That's oh Lord, that's I can't.
Well, it's actually corporate business guiding the government,
Oh, yeah,
and I think
yeah.
that's where my opponent and I differ a lot.
Okay.
You know,
I'm sorry. I just can't. I'm still. That's just
Well, see,
incredible.
so many people don't realize
I
this.
never realized that either.
There was a lady that when the farmers were going on strike, or were talking about striking back in the 80s when prices were so low, the CNN crew interviewed this one lady and said, well, if the farmers go on strike, where will you get your food? She said, I don't care when or if they go on strike. It doesn't matter to me. I shop at Kroger. I mean, just no concept of where actual food and fiber come from.
I could see that coming from my students. You know, we get our food at Kroger, you know, or you know, Walmart, you know, something like that. So, but I remember you were talking about, you know, about the food of origins.
Yep.
There was a big push here a while back for that because I think we were getting our catfish was coming from Vietnam.
They were being raised in Vietnam, and actually it's not even a true catfish. It's a very close cousin of the catfish. And the straw that more or less broke the camel's back were some videos of raw sewage dropping from different homes into the canals where the catfish were raised.
See, that's what I don't understand about our government. You know, we penalize farmers, you know, and all that, and we say we're going to open up, like with, and I noticed you were against NAFTA and a lot of that stuff, you know, to help all, you know, these like Mexico and Central America and all. But they don't realize they don't have the same, you know, safety issues that we do. You know, our stuff, you know, you have to, that's the same with the oil, same with everything. You know, we regulate everything to death almost. Whereas, like you said, open sewage, you know, and then they ship it over here. And look what happened with like the toys from China, you know, and all,
Right.
you know, like, you know, it's just, it amazes me how
Well,
our
what about
government
the pet,
acts.
what about the pet food?
Oh yeah, the pet
You know,
food. Yeah, it was
they were
lead in it.
No, it was melamine.
Okay, yeah.
And what melamine is actually a plastic. But when you test it in the laboratory, it shows a very high protein content. So the Chinese were adding this to the food so that when the pet food was tested, it would show very high in protein. They also added it to some infant baby formula. If you remember about 4 years ago, Richard, when the Chinese children were actually dying, the poor mothers were feeding their infant, but the product they were feeding them had absolutely no nutritional value. The children were eating, but they were starving to death.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up free trade, because I would like to see a reworking of NAFTA. I was part of a team which went to Central America in 2005 before CAFTA was actually passed. We went down there to investigate what would happen specifically in the livestock front. But while we were there, we approached a lot of issues involving labor and actually cultural differences, because people had seen what had happened to Mexico under NAFTA. And while we complain about losing jobs to Mexico, do you realize that Mexico then lost the majority of those jobs to Central America?
So they just kept going south.
They did, and in Central America, it was causing a huge disruption of their society. Because take, for example, the shirt factories that used to be down here in southern Hinds County. Once that they moved from Mexico to Central America, they hired workers there, but the workers they hired were the women, because their hands were smaller, they could do more fine work. But Richard, they made these ladies work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And if you don't show up 2 days, you've lost your job. And it had a disrupting effect on the society down there. Because like it or not, Central America is a very male-dominated, macho-type culture. And when the lady received a job earning 7 times what her husband could earn, this did not play well in the home, and especially when you had the double whammy of, honey, I got to go to work, you need to keep the kids today. Oh, this would
They didn't want to be house dads.
No, they would either abandon the children, or hopefully the mother or mother-in-law would come in to take over to watch the kids, but it caused a rampant rise in alcoholism and spousal abuse just because of the change in the culture. And unbelievably, the Central American jobs have left and gone to China.
And so now even the wife's not making no money. So.
No, not anymore.
All right. Kind of on that same note, I noticed you're on the income tax.
Right.
And the reason I bring that up is because I think that's the reason a lot of corporations are leaving. And you talk about more of a fair tax. And
Right.
So explain what you, and I want to ask you a couple questions on that.
Okay, I have to be clear, because there's a gentleman here in Mississippi, a very nice guy, Alan Ramsey.
I'm in 2 weeks. He'll be
Okay,
here.
who is promoting what's being called the fair tax, and what I said is we need a fair tax. The fair tax, as Mr. Ramsey's called, I'm still studying it. I'm having a hard time making his figures jive with actually running the budget. but it is more or less a value-added tax, which, if we had a repeal of the 16th Amendment, I could probably support something along that effort. But until you repeal the 16th Amendment, you're very much in danger of adding a new tax. What I would like to see happen is have taxes totally eliminated on corporations, because corporations pay no taxes.
No.
You know, they just simply pass that on.
During my campaign, that's one of the things we tried to emphasize. They don't pay it.
But what I would like to see, what I actually would like to see, is a very, very fair tax. And the fairest tax that I can imagine is utilization of the minimum wage as your baseline. Imagine, if you would, minimum wage is roughly $14,000 to $15,000. So we'll just say 15 for the sake of discussion. If that was your deduction, the minimum wage, as a single person, your son would get to deduct $15,000. You and your wife together could deduct $15,000 apiece. So on the first $30,000 of income, you would pay no taxes whatsoever. Now, if you want to tweak that and have the earned income credit and these other income adjustments, that's an entirely separate issue. But everything above that, whether you earned another $10 or $10 million, should be at exactly the same rate for everybody. That way, if the amount is 21%, then you know that the professional athlete's going to be paying 21% on his salary. You know that the steel worker's going to be paying 21% on his, and you know that the guy that has tried to do a little bit better than minimum wage is going to be paying 21% on his extra $1,000.
You know, 21% of 100,000 is 21%, like you said.
Yep.
You know, it's that's why they call it fair.
It's
Everybody's
absolutely
paying
fair.
the same rate.
Yep.
Now, you were talking about Alan Rand. Like I said, he's going to be in a couple of weeks, and I've talked with him considerably, and I've read Neil Board's books, both his books and stuff. And I haven't gone into checking the numbers and stuff.
Yep.
And the concept I like. Now, like you said, it's kind of a value-added tax, but it's not a hidden one like what they're trying to push now.
Oh, yes.
This one is actually going to be printed on the receipt. But that was one of the questions I asked him about the 16th Amendment too. You know, I said it's got to be a bill that kind of basically it's got to do both at the same time. If you're going to bring this in, you got to get rid of this. And some of the things I liked about it was the fact that people get to keep everything, whatever you contract with your employer, that's what you get to keep.
Right.
You know, and things along that line. And I think that they were looking at 23%. Now, this book was written about 5 years ago, I think, when they came up with that. And there's a lot of things that changed since then. So I think, you know, they have to rework the numbers quite a bit. But I think that's one of the things, like I said, pushing off corporations, you know, is that our high income tax. We have gone to from one of the most fairest ones to one of, I think we're the second highest or third highest.
I'm not exactly certain where we stand.
We're way up there.
I do know we pay a lot.
Oh yeah, but and see the thing is, Ireland has, you know, kind of seen what's happening here, and they've actually lowered theirs. Now I don't know if they've zeroed it out, you know, but it's gone way down, and businesses are flocking to Ireland. You know, same thing with China now. You know, it's a lower. Now China's got the advantage of lower labor costs too. You know. So.
Well, they have lower labor costs. They don't have to comply with OSHA.
Right.
They don't have to comply with the EPA.
So that's don't even get me started with EPA. You know, you know that.
Now, I'm not in favor of dirty water or dirty air.
No. But I mean, they're excessive regulation. Well, you know, as a farmer. I didn't like what they did in California, you know, with the little fish.
Where they were taking the water away from the fish.
Killing, you know, some of the best land in the country, and you're looking at pictures of it, and it's just dry.
Without water, it's a desert.
Yeah, and you know, and the thing was, it was a desert before you know we got there, and Americans came in with ingenuity and made it some of the most fertile land in the nation, and one little organization in the government, you know.
If the government will get out of the way, the American people will continue to make this nation the most prosperous
It will.
in the world.
I can understand some safety regulations, you know, health regulate, you know, not excessive, but you know you've got to have some because unfortunately there are, you know, some business people that will take advantage. We've seen it and even today, we still have that. But there's got to be some regulation. But like you said, if the government gets out of the way, our economy will boom.
Well, yeah. And in talking about the Constitution and changing the Constitution, Richard, you heard me on the campaign trail 2 years ago. Changing the Constitution or amending the Constitution is one of the very last things that I want to do, because people often, in the heat of the moment, think, this sounds like a good idea, let's press ahead with it. And so you get bad laws, such as the 16th Amendment. If you will check the history on the income tax, originally it was called the super tax, and it was not to exceed 5%. And of course now it's much, much higher than that.
I think, I think January 1st for even the lower income, it's going up to almost 20%.
Well, now you say going up, it's actually reverting.
Reverting. Rather, yeah.
So, and I always wondered why the Republicans, when they were in control, did not pass it to make those permanent.
I think it was some kind of. I mean, they didn't have enough votes at the time, I think is what it was. I wasn't following politics as much as I should have back then. I got into it just a little bit later. I was starting into it right then.
But I don't like for people to call it a tax increase, because it's actually not. It's an expiration of a tax holiday.
So, well, tax holiday. But
and if you're going to die, this is a good year to do it.
They said this. Steinbrenner. They said, this is because if he had waited till next year, or had lasted that long, I think 55% of his fortune would have gone. Whereas this year they got to keep it all.
That's right. So. And talking about other bad amendments, are you familiar with the 17th Amendment?
Refresh my memory. And I can.
That is the one for allowing the direct election of senators.
Oh yeah.
With that came about the same time as the income tax amendment, and the height of arrogance of the people in that day to say, we no longer need to have our legislators picking our senators. We can vote for them directly because we have telegraph and we have newspapers, and there's no longer any reason for that. They missed the idea of the Founding Fathers. You know why the Founding Fathers let the legislators pick the senators? It's in support of states' rights.
Right, let the states choose.
That's why each state had 2 senators that were picked by their legislators. And as good as Senator Cochran is, if you have a problem and you call him up, you're not going to get to talk to him. You'll get to talk to a staffer. And they may or may not get back to you. Most of the time out of Senator Cochran's office, they do get back to you. But you have no guarantee, and you certainly don't get to talk to the senator. On the other hand, if you call your local senator and representative from the Hinds County area and say, look, I got a problem with this. I need you to talk to Senator Cochran if you would. And so those folks get on the telephone and call him up and say, Thad, I'm one of 174 people that get to vote for you, and I have a constituent that has a problem. Now, how quickly do you think your problem would be solved?
I can see that, yeah.
So that's a difference where people thought it was a good idea at the time. Prohibition is another one. Whether you agree with alcohol consumption or not, it proved to be so unworkable that they were forced to repeal it. And now you're hearing talk of repealing the 14th Amendment, the one which provides due process, in order to get rid of the what's been called the anchor baby provision. We might want to tweak that somehow or another, but Richard, a lot of people do not realize that until the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights did not apply to states in the Constitution. You could have had the Church of the State of Mississippi were it not for the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, just that one part about the anchor babies, I think that's all they really need to work on is that part.
Yeah, right.
And that part I happen to agree with. I think we're, because of the illegal immigration. So, well, since we've kind of worked our way around to the 14th, now I agree with you on the other one. 16th one I think really needs to go.
I don't think you'll get much, other than people in government, I don't think there'll be many people that stand up for it.
Yeah, but I agree with paying income tax. I don't want to make people think I don't. I agree that you we've got to support the country. So
right.
But I don't believe in excessive. And when you get up to, when you start to get up, and even the rich folks, you keep saying that, I mean, I'm not saying you, I'm saying, but they keep saying, we'll tax the rich for this one. We'll add another point. Eventually, the rich are going to get tired of it.
Richard, if you tax them 100%,
yeah, I saw it on your website. Yeah.
you tax them 100% on the people earning the top 5%. It's still not enough to run the government.
I think somebody figured the numbers. If you taxed everybody 100%, it's still not enough. I don't know. I heard that one. Now I'm not sure if they really run the numbers or they were just being facetious at the time. But it's
and that may well be. And as you get into office and you actually work within the law, then some things which seem to be common sense on the outside, you begin to pale. Such as mayor, I'm often approached, why don't we have a dog control ordinance in this town? We have dogs running wild. Well, point of fact, we have about 7 that are a little unruly, do turn over a few trash cans and things. But if we passed a dog control ordinance in our small town, of which our total budget in the general fund is around $300,000. It's not a huge,
right.
In fact, my company's a lot larger than the town, but you would have to hire an animal control officer,
right,
or designate one. You would have to get that person a vehicle. Now then you've added an extra probably $40,000 per year to the expense of the town. You would further have to contract with a local veterinarian or an animal shelter to house the animals. Then no one is going to want them put down.
Right.
So you will have that ongoing cost. But the one thing that people really don't look at is right now with no law, if a dog bites you, I'm terribly sorry that you were bitten. However, if we had an animal control ordinance and a dog bites someone, now all of a sudden the town can be sued for failure to enforce their ordinance.
And there goes your $300,000 budget.
Well, there goes our insurance policies for sure. So that's the law of unintended consequences.
So, but and people don't realize. I mean, I didn't realize until I started getting into this, all the different things, But there's
another one you'll hear of is you're in, you're out. Where they're wanting people that are. They're saying, as a condition of my employment, I have to take a urine test for drugs. It should be only fair that people receiving public assistance should take a urine test for drugs.
Yeah.
The reason you can't is because of the Constitution. You are employed by will in the state of Mississippi. And if your employment for that particular employer requires you to have that test as a condition of your employment, then they're within their rights to demand that. However, in the public sector, you are covered by the due process clause. And so when you're hired by the town, those employees cannot be asked to take a drug test because they are not presumed to be under the influence of drugs, even in the case of an accident. Now, this does not apply to holders of commercial driver's license, because that's a requirement in federal law. It also does not apply to police officers because of their use of a weapon, and it does not apply to attack firefighters because of the danger to themselves and others. But your ordinary workers, your garbage workers, your park grass mowers.
Okay, now, if they come in drunk and they fall off the truck.
If they come in drunk and come off the truck, I'll fire them on the spot.
Okay.
For that. But I mean, they could.
They have to be more obvious.
Yes, they could not be legally required.
Okay.
Now, that's what. I know this seems to be splitting hairs, but when
that's we get back once again to government regulations interfering with things.
Well, I often say it's the law and common sense have very little to do with each other.
That makes sense. Okay, well, we were talking about the 14th Amendment. Let's talk a little bit about illegal immigration.
Okay.
Because I guess that's one of the top things.
It's a hot button issue, and with me, it really is, because I mentioned RCAF USA, that national cattle group that I was. Do you know that the Arizona rancher that was shot and killed, he was a member of my group?
This is the one I just want to point out. We went to Benny Thompson's town hall, that he was going down because to find out the facts about, because we're not sure whether he was shot by, And so
He,
we're going.
he was this fellow.
No,
had
I mean everybody. I think except Benny knew it.
Well, he has an extremely large ranch
Mm-hmm.
there, or he did, and he was opposed to illegal immigration. He would, however, being a compassionate Christian individual, offer water
Yeah, I heard that he left water
to these folks
yeah.
as they were passing across. Now he would also alert the authorities that people were crossing, but the investigation has shown that it was most likely drug related, which is another scourge on our nation.
Right. So you're
But,
are you?
but
are
for
you,
back to
yeah, let's
the
get
immigration issue, I'm not in favor of illegal immigration. I'm definitely not in favor, as I said 2 years ago, of having a pathway to citizenship for illegals already here. I am in favor of very strong penalties against employers
I like that's the one I like.
that choose to hire these illegals. I understand that with Howard Industries that there was one minor company exec that may have received some rebuke from the court system, but as far as the owners, as far as the other people responsible, no. And there were over 400
Right,
illegals.
and I think, getting back to it, they say, well, we don't have any Americans that want the job yet. The next day, there's like, what, 700 or 800?
There was enough to fill the positions.
And over, you know.
Yes.
That's like a Toyota plant. You know, I heard that they just started hiring, or they're getting ready to. 35 salary position, they had 5,000 applications.
Right.
Don't tell me that Americans won't work for anything. Now, of course, that's the Toyota plant's more of a higher pay job. But the people will work. You just offer them a fair wage.
Yep.
That's all we ask.
And I am in favor of revamping our immigration laws, because I'm not opposed to legal immigration.
No,
at all. If you want to come here legally, especially if you want to learn the language, be assimilated into the population, to share the American dream, I'm all for you. Please come ahead.
Americans have always opened their arms, you know.
But, you know, under the previous administration, and I'm not calling any names, I'm not bashing anybody, I'm just simply stating facts, the number of legal visas to come to this country was cut in half. And I don't know if you've studied much on the visa issue, but they have what's called the H-1A visa. Now, if you get one of those, they're usually given to physicians or pharmacists or engineers, people of that education level. Then, if you don't like your employment position, you can leave. And you can move somewhere else, and you're still a legal resident of the United States. If you come here under one of the agricultural ones or one of the unskilled ones, the H-1B, H-2B visas, you're locked into that employer. It's virtually an indentured servitude.
Oh.
If he tells you, this is the bunkhouse where you're staying with 20 other people,
No.
you've got to stay there. If you leave, then you're now illegal.
No, see, I disagree with that. And if you've gone through the process, you've learned English, you're ready to assimilate. You know, I'm not saying leave your old stuff behind, leave the bad stuff. And you know, but America's a culture, you know, melting pot. We've got all kinds of culture, but you know, bring the good stuff with you. You know, you get here, you've gone through the process. God bless you.
Yep.
You know. Because if you've gone through the process, you've gone through almost hell. You know.
Well, you sure put in 7 years.
Yeah. See, that's what one of the things I'm in favor of. You know, let's you know, when you do a background check, I believe in that. You know, because I don't want to end up like with one of the not the previous one, but one of the past ones, where we got all those people from Cuba, and just open the doors and turned out to be a whole lot of criminals coming in. No, if you've got a criminal background, depending on the crime again, you know, but if it's a violent crime, I'm sorry, no,
You're out.
You're out. And
we don't need any more felons.
no, we got plenty. You know, just check down with I won't use the term that Kim Wade uses about it, Parchment. But, you know, but I just mentioned Kim Wade. You can imagine how you know. But no, bring in, you know, like you said, the dentist. But we do need, you know, if you're a common laborer and you've gone through the process, come on in. You know,
Right.
now
You're welcome to participate.
if
you play by the rules, you're welcome to
But you
participate.
know, but make sure we're not bringing grandma and grandpa unless they, you know, they got to go through the same thing. But I'm for if it's 7 years, you know, and the paperwork, you know, because government's got to have everything in quadruple, you know. Let's make it a little bit easier, you know, so that, you know, learn the language, take the tests, you know, and all that. but let's help them along a little bit. Now, the big thing, like I said, the background check, because we get too much. But if it's a hardworking person wants to come better their life and they're going through the steps, the process, I put my hand out and shake it when they come across the border. But those folks that just walk across, mostly because you don't know who's coming, you
Right.
know.
Right. And you don't know why they're coming.
Right.
And I was at an interesting discussion where a lady said, well, why don't we try and cooperate more with the government of Mexico to get them to stop people on their side of the border?
They're encouraging it.
Quite frankly, Richard, they send so much money back
Yeah.
to Mexico that without the United States as an engine, Mexico would be in far worse shape than it is today.
We're one of the top employers.
Yes.
of the Mexican,
One of the leading industries
Yeah,
in
industry
Mexico,
sending it back, and especially like right now with what's going on along the border with all the crime. Obama sent 1,200 National Guards, which were paper pushers, I think. Now, to me, it's a desert. It's just like the Middle East. Be good training ground. Now, I'm not saying take guns. I think we use maybe non-lethal bullets and stuff, but it'd be a good way for them to to practice.
And your statement right there just shows exactly why a fence per se would not work.
Yeah.
They'll go under it. They'll go over it.
Yeah. It's a
cut through
deterrent.
it, yes,
but it's not a fail-safe.
No, and it's definitely a waste of money, and we're wasting far too much money in Washington, D.C. right now. And
Right.
suggested ideas such as cap and trade. Can you imagine anything more horrific?
See, that I was
than
talking.
that?
I talked to my students this afternoon a little bit about that, about how we send $700 billion a year overseas buying oil. Well, we've got enough oil and coal and gas and everything here to last us. They estimate anywhere from 50 to 100 years.
Yep.
Which I'm not saying we just stick with that, but let's start using that and start working on those alternative methods. If we can make wind profitable, if we can make solar profitable, fine. But we can't do without oil. or
Well,
coal.
if you remember, President Carter started that in '76.
It went way back. Yeah.
And so we haven't made much progress on
Right.
it. I will tell you, in Australia, they had spent a lot of money developing the wind turbines and putting them up there. They're still not feasible to actually put into production for electricity.
And it's really in Mississippi they won't, because we don't have that much
No,
wind.
no, we don't.
You got to have wind.
Solar is fairly viable, but again, you're talking about electricity. You're not going to get your solar-powered car
No.
to drive down the road. We're going to be with oil and fossil fuels
And
for a while.
And what's the car they just came out with, the electric car that President Obama was raving about? It'll go 40 miles.
The Volt?
The Volt,
Volt,
yeah.
yes.
The Chevy Volt. It'll go 40 miles on a charge. Okay, then
Well,
what?
with me, that'd get me almost to Jackson.
Yeah. Then what? We go back. You go right back to gasoline kicks in. So, it's a good start maybe, but until you can get the batteries, whether you're able to drive a day.
Well, actually look for a different fuel source.
Yeah.
My degree, as you knew, was in physics and astronomy. The most powerful atom that we have is the hydrogen atom. Now, if you can harness hydrogen and have it where it is stable in a vehicle, Richard, you'll run that as a perfectly clean machine, because the product of burning hydrogen is water vapor.
Right. Have you seen any of those? I know you see the little ads all the time about the hydrogen cars. Do you know if any of those actually work?
I've not seen any of them.
I've seen some videos on YouTube and all that show it working, and I've talked to a couple of friends and we've looked at it, but I don't know if it's. I keep wanting to put it on my truck just to try it, because I'm getting 14 miles to a gallon.
I've not heard of one that is commercially viable yet.
Okay.
It's basically because of the instability
I
of
heard of-
hydrogen.
I
Maybe
heard
if
of-
you recall the Hindenburg,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that.
I heard about one guy that put on his, and he ended up, I think, getting like 2 miles per gallon more.
I
with
haven't
the
heard of
mixture.
an add-on to help that
Yeah.
with hydrogen enrichment. I
So,
would be very skeptical of
I
that.
don't know exactly what he did, but it was a friend of a friend,
Yeah.
and so I haven't seen the car, so I
Right.
don't know if it's actually still running or not. But But like you said, hydrogen, like things like that. And like I said, the batteries. One of the problems you run into the batteries too is eventually they wear out. What are you going to do with them?
Right.
And so we end up with the problems we have now with just everybody talked about the little batteries. We get mountains of those things.
But I would like to discuss some of the differences between some of the similarities and differences between my opponent and myself.
All right. Well,
as I said, this is a replay of 2008 when we came down to it. At that time, it was kind of generic Republican against generic Democrat.
Right.
But this time, Mr. Harper actually has a record. And if you examine that record, what you're going to find is his opposition to cap and trade. I would have opposed cap and trade as well. You're also going to find his opposition to the TARP, the bailout bill. Very often it's lumped with the first stimulus and called stimulus, but it's actually the bailout bill, the toxic assets relief. Anytime you've got toxic in the name, you probably know it's not a good thing, and it's definitely not a good thing for the taxpayer. You're never too big to fail.
Right.
Every bankruptcy that I've seen, there's always been somebody waiting in the wings to take up at least pieces of that company, and it reemerges bigger and stronger.
I used to use Pan Am as an example. They went bankrupt. Airline industry is going to fail.
Yep.
Nope. There was people waiting right in line
Yep.
as soon as they finished up. And from my understanding with the TARP, they were talking about if they had let these companies go bankrupt, these things, like you said, we'd have been over this a whole lot quicker.
Absolutely.
And probably a stronger economy. We might not. Now we might have had a crash because of some of the things that happened.
You would have
been as bad.
You would have had a great temporary dislocation, but that's a key word there. I think is temporary.
Right.
Another thing that you found is just the arrogance of some of those executives. I mean, can you imagine AIG saying, "We need help. You need to bail us out of this insurance crisis." And as soon as the money comes down, they take $500,000 and send their employees to spas.
Yeah, they threw a party.
Right.
Yeah, I remember reading.
I mean, what a slap in the face to the American people.
Right.
Now, with the stimulus bill, where Mr. Harper voted against it, I would have voted in favor of it, because everywhere that you see these American Recovery and Reinvestment Act signs, that's actually shovel-ready jobs that are underway. All of your rest areas that you see on the interstates in Mississippi that are currently closed, they're all being refurbished and paid for by the government. Another thing that people forget when they badmouth the stimulus, where in the world would our Mississippi legislature have gotten the $177 million that they used to balance the budget? They would have either had to raise your taxes or dramatically cut services this past year.
Right.
Now, see, that goes under
I
the
think
radar.
I think what a lot of folks were upset about also in that were the earmarks, the kind of things that were just kind of thrown in there. Now, I can understand if it's legitimate, but when we spent $90,000 for doorbells in Laurel, Mississippi. Okay, $90,000 for doorbells, and the people down there were going, "What are you doing with money? We're putting in doorbells because that's what we're supposed to do."
Well, I've, as mayor, I've been recipient of some of those earmarked funds for different things, and they are very specific with what you can use them for. However, I will also say the earmark that was included for our street paving project, we could not have possibly have paved 3 of our main streets, the worst ones
that's
there.
what I consider legitimate.
And I'm glad you brought up earmarks, because I don't like the idea of an earmark stuck in the middle of a defense bill or something late at night. Let's get all of the earmarks out in front, put them in one standalone bill, and then if you have a Republican senator or somewhere from Alaska that wants to build a bridge to nowhere, let him defend that in the open, transparent bill.
I've always believed if it's a bill that can't stand on its own, it don't need to stand at all. So.
And as I said 2 years ago, I will happily vote for a water project in the state of Washington if the guy in the state of Washington will vote for a sewer project here in Mississippi.
Right.
And while these sewer projects may be spending on waste, Richard, they're not wasteful spending.
Right.
There's
the ones where they're building a tennis court, that they're going to put, that congressman's name on, whatever. That's the kind of stuff. But if it's something that's going to improve the community, and I'm not talking tennis courts or swimming
Yep.
pools, I'm talking about paving streets,
Yep.
because everybody's going to be on that street.
Right.
Or now, one thing I didn't like about the stimulus was that and part of the education that they used, and this was my understanding. And I was told this, and I never got a chance to look it up. And it just come to mind that if they use part of that money to work on a school, to add an addition to it, or whatever, that they couldn't hold religious services in there. And I thought that would. Now, like I said, I'm not sure that's exactly what it was. This is what I was told. And I'm going, if that's the case, then I don't want it for the schools, because, I think that's where a lot of our school problems have come from. Being a teacher is because we can't teach the Ten Commandments. Now I know I might get letters about this, but I think, you've got to have a basis in there, because I've seen with some of these, these kids, they don't, unfortunately, they don't have any home training, what we used to call it,
Yep.
and you can't do anything with them at school to train them like that, because it's against the law,
And the amazing thing about it is, if you talk to some older African Americans and older white folks that are our age or older, they'll tell you, if I got a beating in school, you were going to get another one when you got home.
Yeah.
And sometimes the neighbors might do it, because it was a sense. It was a
the
sense of
neighborhood
community.
the neighborhood look bad.
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. But the No Child Left Behind. I know as a teacher you have come across that, and while it sounded good in
It
theory,
looks good on paper. Yeah.
but when you put it in the classroom,
Yeah, it
it
doesn't.
ties your hands, doesn't
Right.
it, Richard?
Yeah.
Makes you teach to the test,
Right.
rather than actually teaching the individual student who you see every day and who you know more about than anybody possibly could in Washington.
One of the problems we've always talked about Washington is there's too much going up there that trying to run down here. And I think I might have read it. I might have been on your website. I have to look at what the block grants, like education. I'm for getting rid of the Department of Education,
Oh,
because
yes,
it's mandated in the Constitution. It's a state thing. Now, if the federal government's going to pay for it, you give it to the money,
to
and
the
you
state.
designate that this is going to be for education. And they can't spend it on roads, or they
Right.
can't spend it on anything else, and then it's divided up per
Of course,
student.
then you know what'll happen. All the money they were spending on education, they'll say, "No, the federal government's got it now. We'll spend this
Now,
on
I
roads."
did like Alabama tried that,
Yeah.
tried that once, and there was a stipulation that was put in there that if you cut your regular budget, now it might have just been that 1 year,
Yeah.
they probably took care of it the next year, you lose the money. So that was kind of stacked on top, and so they were kind of hand stacked. So in that case, I like a government stimulation, because it keeps the the state government a little bit in line, because they're just like a government. I mean a business. They're going to try and cut corners where they can, and they've got pet projects they want to do. But schools, I think, is one place you don't cut corners.
Yep.
Police departments, fire
Of course, now
departments.
throwing money
Yeah.
at the school,
No.
that
It's gotta-
doesn't help either.
No. And I personally believe teachers are accountable, but I also believe parents are accountable. You've got to bring them parents, because, to give you an example, I had a boy, and he was bigger than I was, and we're talking the 7th grade, came in and was disruptive. Called mama and says, we're having a little problem, can you take, well, he's bigger than I am, I can't do anything with him. What do you expect me to do?
You're
If
his
you,
mother.
You can't do
Yes.
nothing with him, A lot of times you have to call grandma, and grandma will take care of him, But the parents got to have some responsibility too. I'm all in favor of the parents, of the legislature, setting up something where the parents can come at least visit one day and follow their child around, and pay the employer as, a tax credit in a sense, so that the parent can actually see what the child's doing. Now, it has to be a kind of a day set up with the school, but not all of them one day.
Yeah.
We make these days available. I'm also in favor of the legislature coming down and do it one day and not being announced. Now the legislature, I'm all for just showing up and not at the good schools.
Yep.
Come to the ones in the inner city.
Where
see
you
what
actually
the-
see what's going on.
See what's really going on.
And if you're a good legislator, you probably already knew
Yeah.
what was going on there.
Right.
Anyway.
But I'm, like I said, I was on interview by a national radio personality a while back, and he asked me about that, about why I'm for giving the teachers more money, and I said, it's not teachers everywhere, because a lot of teachers make good money. Mississippi, we're still at the bottom.
Yep.
And all I would say is, let's bring us up to the southeastern average. You know, now, once again, I want to go back to the fact that teachers got to be held accountable. If a teacher is not performing well, it's time to find somebody that does. Now, I hope that I'm one of those that are performing well, because I've been, a teacher for 25 years, and I've got high marks from all my principals. So I'm hoping that continues, but for at least 7 more years.
There you go. Get your retirement.
To my retirement. But now let me ask you this, because I got a question. I got a survey about this. And
Okay.
if you were to go to Washington, and everything worked out right, would you work to change the retirement process? And I wasn't aware of it at the time when they asked me, so I left that question blank.
Which retirement process are you talking about?
For Congress? Because my understanding, this is the way I was finally told about it. If you're in there for one term, you're vested.
That's right.
That's
correct.
Whereas I'm teaching now for 18 years in public schools, and I've still got 2 more years before I'm fully vested.
See, that's like people talk about the 28th Amendment.
Yeah.
Now, that is one that I could support. That's the one that says,
It took 200 years to pass.
says any plan that Congress has shall be open to the people.
Right.
And any law that Congress passes for the people.
Oh, that was the 27th one I'm thinking about.
Okay.
The 28th one. I know which one you're talking about.
So,
Yeah.
of course, that's not going to happen, because
no.
Congress won't do it. But I'm a strong believer in term limits. In fact, personally, I'll pledge right now that I hope I can do everything in 3 terms. I would not serve more than 5.
Right. I've always it was pushed 5 terms for House, 2 terms for Senate.
Right. Absolutely. Because honestly, if you can't get it right in 22 years, combination, if you can't get it right in 10 years in the House, you don't have any business being there.
No.
You can't get it right in 12 years in the Senate, you don't have
And
any
unfortunately, some of those that are be there for the 22 think, oh, look, they don't want me here, I'm going to run for president. So, they move on to that next step.
Right.
So.
But a few more of the differences between Mr. Harper and myself. When Governor Barber was begging for funding for the Children's Health Insurance Bill, the S-CHIPS bill, Mr. Harper voted no. Unbelievably, a vote against the children of Mississippi. And then equally stunning was in February of 2009 when he voted against equal pay for women. Now, this doesn't show up on his website.
Okay.
And a lot of the ladies say, well, I think he's a very nice man. I said, did you know that he's voted against equal pay for women? What? When? And so I point that out to them. What it had to do with is Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. Lilly Ledbetter was a lady who was working in a Lilly Ledbetter was working as a tire inspector in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing exactly the same thing as her male counterpart was doing. Over the lifetime of her employment, she was paid $200,000 less.
Wow.
She sued. She won the lawsuit, but because of a technicality in the current law providing for equal pay for women, she was not able to collect a dime because she was outside the statute of limitations.
Oh.
So the Congress got to work, and they came up and they passed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which allows a modest 2-year look-back period, so that even if a lady has been discriminated against, whenever she finds out, she can look back for the last 2 years of her employment with that employer. It's hardly a trial lawyer's dream,
Yeah.
which was how it was decried by the Republican Party, but yet Mr. Harper voted against it. So, I mean, I would love to get that word out to the people, and I hope there are enough viewers that come on and catch wind
Well, we're
of that.
new, but we've been getting quite a bit of views on, so hopefully,
Good. And as far as the stimulus, you hear a lot of talk against it, but yet this is a little disingenuous when that same group of Republicans did not complain about the $600 that the previous president passed out as a pre-stimulus that to me did absolutely no good.
Yeah, it did some good for us because my producer over here got a car.
Okay,
So,
well,
yeah.
there you go.
That's where ours went. We actually put ours back, into the economy.
And the same way, had somebody actually been thinking when they pass TARP. Again, I was opposed to it.
Right.
But if you're going to, and you're bailing out these banks because the home mortgage failures were occurring, the people were not able to pay their mortgage, why send the money direct to the bank? Why not make the check payable to the bank and to the mortgage holder?
Right.
That way they would be forced to send that money to the bank. Bank would still get the money. The person would, though, have a little bit of breathing room. They could then have some extra stimulus to buy something somewhere else while they're getting back on their feet, while they're getting their home caught up. And if you spread this payment out over, say, a 6-month period, who's to say that this person couldn't actually be back in business and on their feet? And
I always believe that instead of just giving it to the bank, or the banks actually all they did was
keep it,
right. And they still keeping a lot of it. But I said, well, why not help these people get out from that? I forget the name of the high interest loan thing, and put them into because like I went in when I bought my house, I got in at a fixed rate. It's never going to go up. I mean, I'm going to be paying pretty much the same for 30 years. And that's one of the reasons I'm not retiring anytime soon, according to my wife. I've got a lot.
And actually, if you would check into it, you could probably refinance now to get that down to 15 years and have your payment be virtually the same. Yeah. With the low rates. That are out there
that's
today.
One of the things I've been thinking about because the rates are still kind of low. So. Well, I think it's getting about the time now. What have you got anything coming up? To tell the folks in the next couple weeks, any events or anything coming up? Or?
Well, I'm pleased that you had me on because I'm mostly the invisible man. When some of these pundits are discussing it, they say, well, it looks like Mr. Harper has the 3rd District wrapped up. They don't even mention my name, Richard, which hurts a little bit because I'm out there as a legitimate candidate.
I found that out when I ran the second time, because apparently Marcy was the candidate everybody wanted. I mean, I like Bill Marcy, don't get me wrong. And people forgot, I ran in 08 when it wasn't popular to be a Republican, So, I've put in some dues here, So.
But I do have the credentials. I do have the background. I do have the desire, and I do have the ability. And that is one thing about us. That's where I differ from Mr. Harper, because with me, the people will know that I will actually consider the positions. I'll read the bills before they're voted on. I will do my best to craft a position which corresponds to what the people of the 3rd District want. If you start off saying no, you're not part of the solution. Right. And if at the end of the day I can't be effective in getting the changes that the people want, I can still always vote no. But if you want to know how Mr. Harper's going to vote, check with John Boehner's office. To give you an example, and I'm not bad-mouthing him personally, I'm just taking his quote from his television commercial in 2008. He said, Washington is broken. We need to fix it. We need to make changes. He has 18 people on his staff. 2/3 of them were holdovers from Congressman Pickering's staff. When it came time to vote for the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader in this particular case, rather than going with the new man, that vibrant young congressman, Republican congressman from California, Mr. Harper went with the tried and true old John Boehner coming out once again. So as long as you're supporting the party line, as long as you are not considering anything that's going on, as long as you're more concerned about your position within the party than taking care of the people of Mississippi, you're not a very good congressman.
So if you get elected and the Democrats hold the House, you're not going to just, I'll use the word because it's been used before, cow down to Nancy Pelosi.
Absolutely not. It may mean that when you come to your office, or the people of the 3rd District come to their office in Washington, I may have to turn over a mop bucket in the broom closet to host them to sit on.
We won't ever hear Chairman Joel Gill
at this time. But I mean, there aren't any freshmen that I know of that ever get to be chairman anyway.
Okay. So. All right. So the website is
www.weknowEverything.com. gillforcongress.org.
I found out. Be sure you put the .org.
.org. Now, there is another one. That will carry you to my homepage. But for some people that have trouble with that, it's www.joel, Joel, Gill, Gill, forcongress.com.
Okay.
That will carry you immediately to the comparison between how Mr. Harper voted and how I would have voted.
Okay. Well, I didn't found the Gill for Congress.
But you can also get back to the homepage.
Don't go to the gillforcongress.com. There is another Gill that's running for Congress.
Okay.
I forget where he's at now, but I went there and went, wait, this is not Joe.
No, .org. I did that originally in 2008, Richard, because the only product I was trying to sell was myself.
Right. Okay.
And I hope I've done a good job with your listeners tonight.
I've enjoyed it. I found a lot of things that I didn't know about, so I appreciate it. That's why we on the show we put the little almost in parentheses, So, but I appreciate you coming out. It's been fun and enjoyable, and I hope you'll join in with next week. At the moment, I don't have anybody lined up. I'm working on a couple, but in 2 weeks, Alan Ramsey will be here. We're going to talk about the fair tax, and maybe we can talk to him about the numbers now and see, what he's looking at.
Right, and your viewers can send me a message over the email from the website, or they can contact me directly, 601-613-1235.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I do answer my phone.
He does. I've answered it. He when I first called him, he was actually at an auction, I believe, and had to step outside, and I could hear the auctioneers still in the background. So he's the one that answers the phone. That's the way I was with my campaign. Mm-hmm. If you want to contribute, just go to the website.
Go to the website. You can give with a credit card, or you could mail one in directly. My campaign box is P.O. Box 1755, Ridgeland, Mississippi, 39158.
Okay.
And please make it payable to Joel Gill for Congress.
Okay.
And I appreciate any help, and thank you so much for letting me be on tonight.
It's been fun, enjoyable. Well, that's our show for this week. Tune in again next week. We'll have another show. I don't know if there'll be somebody or just be me, but you may find out. This has been We Know Everything Almost, and now you know something. Night.